This is a tutorial for section T3. Find the focus or directrix of a parabola, Algebra 2. These problems aren't hard when you think about the math that's involved, but it's definitely one of those longer kind of endurance problems that you need to stick with, go through all the steps to get to the correct answer. So think about, I call this kind of like a long division problem that you're going to have like quite a few steps before you get to your answer. So stick with it, and remember that the math isn't hard, it's just the endurance of sticking with all the steps. So the questions are going to look like, what is the focus of the parabola y equals 4x squared minus 6? So the first step for all of these is to find the vertex. So we did this in the last section, so if you need a review for that, you can go back to that last video. But you should know that if you see y equals 4x squared minus 6, you can rewrite that as 4 for your a value, and then x minus 0 in parentheses, squared, plus a negative 6. So once you do that, you find that your h value was here, so it's a 0. Your k value is negative 6, so negative 6. So you have to find the vertex first because we're going to use part of this to get your answer. It feels like we skip it for a minute, but you can see down here we come back to that vertex, do something with it to get our final answer. So always find your vertex first. The next thing that you need to know is this formula for finding the distance to the focus. So if you remember, a parabola could open up, down, left, or right. It has a vertex, and then this point here, inside of it is its focus, and then the same distance away would be this kind of like imaginary line here called the directrix. So I'm going to label those. So this is the focus, this little point here is the vertex, and then this imaginary line here is the directrix. So the distance to the focus from the vertex and the distance to the directrix from the vertex is the same. So if this is 2, then this is 2. So that's why those two skills are put together. You could either be asked to find the focus or the directrix of a parabola. Now, an obvious thing that you do need to keep in mind while you're doing this, though, is remember that the focus is going to be inside the parabola and the directrix is going to be underneath or on the other side of the parabola. And that's going to come into play in a minute where if you're adding or subtracting the c value, right? So again, the first thing we did was find our vertex. I sketched this out just super fast for you over here so you can kind of see what we're working with visually. And then our formula here is c equals 1 divided by 4 times the absolute value of a. All right, so it's a weird, funky math problem, but we can do this. So once we find what our a is, our a value is here, so that's 4. So then we could plug that in and rewrite it. C equals 1 divided by 4 times the absolute value of 4. Well, we know that the absolute value of any number is positive, so it would be just like saying 4 times 4, right? So 1 over 16 is our c value, right? So once again, what does that mean? What is c? In your flipped math video, it calls it p. So if you did that and you're thinking, okay, now we've got another value, it's still that same value. So either c or p. Here they're calling it c. And it's that distance between the vertex and the focus, right? So the next thing we need to do, remember step 1 was we found the vertex. Step 2 was we found the distance to the focus using this formula. Step 3 is to just take a look back and see which way the parabola opens. This one opens up because the x is being squared and the a is positive. So when we sketched it out in a way where the parabola opens up. So now we have to keep in mind that the focus is going to be, for this parabola that opens up, the focus is going to be above the vertex, right? Above the vertex. So in order to do that, what changed? Now, the x value didn't change at all, right? Because the x-axis is here. So if we move it left or right, then that focus is not going to be centered above the vertex of the parabola, right? So you wouldn't want your focus over here because that would be outside of the parabola. So our x value isn't moving. What's moving is our y value. So the y-axis, this vertical shift, right? So our focus then, we're going to apply this number, we're going to add it to our y because that's going to move our vertex up, right? So when we rewrite this, I wrote my original vertex down 0, -6, and then I'm going to put plus the value of c, that distance to the focus, which is 1/16. So once I do this, -6 plus 1/16, that gives me 0, -95/16. Now you're welcome to do this in your calculator, but what you would need to do is almost treat this like a mixed fraction, right? So 16 times 6, and then add or subtract your 1, right? Or add your 1, sorry. So you get -95/16. So this is a funky answer. It's not pretty, it's a fraction, it's weird. If we tried to plot it just on our notebook paper, that would be a hard thing to plot. But it makes sense mathematically because we were using this formula here to get that 1/16 value, right? So again, first thing is we find our vertex, distance to focus using this formula, see which way the parabola opens, up, down, left, or right, and then add or subtract this value of c either to the x or the y based on where that focus is located in reference to the parabola. All right, let's look at another example. Number 2, what is the focus of the parabola y equals 9x squared plus 2? So I rewrote my problem down here. I wrote it in a way that makes sense to find our h and our k, right? So 0, 2 is our vertex. If we were to sketch this one out over here, so we would say, let's see, over 0 and up 1, 2. So here is our vertex, right? And then we want to also see which way it's opening, right? So now I'm going to skip ahead to this part so I can go ahead and sketch it. The parabola opens up because it's x squared, so we know it's either up or down. Since this 9 was positive, it means that it opens up. So I'm not being precise with this at all clearly. I'm just kind of sketching that parabola because I want to know the direction of the focus. Is it going to be above the vertex, below the vertex, to the left of the vertex, to the right of the vertex? So for a parabola that opens up, remember, we would want our focus to be inside that, so it's going to be above, just like in number 1. So we use our same formula, c equals 1 over 4 times the absolute value of a, to find that distance to the focus. Here our a value is 9, so 4 times 9 is 36. So the distance to the focus is 1 divided by 36, 1/36. We said the parabola opens up, and if we want our focus to be above, then we're going to add that to the y value because the y value is the part that shifts it up or down because it's on the y-axis, right? So we're going to say 2 plus 1/36. And you can see I was already using my phone, I think, to get the sample problems. So I came over here to the side to do the math part. So 36 times 2, just like if it was a mixed fraction, 36 times 2 is 72, and then I added my 1, so 73 divided by 36. So once again, just like number 1, this is a weird, funky fraction thing here for our y value, but that's okay because mathematically everything checks out. So since these are a little tough, I did even more practice problems for you. So let's walk through just a couple more. Number 3, what is the focus of the parabola y equals -2x squared minus 3? So y equals -2x squared minus 3. I rewrite it like this. I find my h and my k values. So h would be my x, k would be my y. So now I know what the vertex is. I can come over here to the side and kind of roughly sketch this. So 0, -3 is my vertex, right? I can check to see which way it opens, right? So we know that it was x squared, so it's either up or down. I look back to my a. Since my a is negative, I know that it opens down. So my focus will be located somewhere lower than this vertex on my y-axis, right? So that's my y-axis and x-axis, so we're just going to move it vertically. So we use our formula to find the distance to the focus. we plug in our a value. Now here's the first time where it really matters that it's an absolute value, right? So if you just plugged in 4 times negative 2, you would have gotten negative 1/8, and that's not correct. So you need to make sure this is an absolute value. The absolute value of negative 2 is positive 2, so 4 times 2 is 8. So 1/8 is the distance to the focus. Now again, since this opens up or down, we know we're going to be using this c value to change the y, but now we have a parabola that's opening down, so we want to subtract that value instead of add it because we're going farther down, farther into the negative numbers on the y-axis instead of up. So if we were to add this value, then we would be placing our focus above the vertex, and that's not correct because our focus has to fall inside the parabola. So since this opens down, we're subtracting our c value from the y. You can see my little math here to the side. And so that leaves us with 0, negative 25/8 as our ordered pair, our coordinate for our focus. All right, number 4. What is the focus of the parabola y equals negative 4x squared? So I rewrote this one, but you might already be able to see that since there's nothing extra here, our vertex actually falls at the origin, 0, 0, right? We use our formula for c to find out the distance to the focus. Our a value is negative 4. A negative becomes a positive when it's in absolute values. So 4 times 4 is 16. So 1/16 is our distance to the focus. Again, we can sketch this out. And our vertex was at 0, 0. We check to see this is x squared, so it's either going to be up or down. And then since it was in negative 4, we know our parabola opens down. So that's just a rough sketch of that. So we want our our focus to fall somewhere inside that parabola. So what we're going to do again is we're going to move it up or down on the y-axis. So we're only going to apply that 1/16 to the y value because if we applied it to that first 0, you're moving it left and right. So now we have to decide if we're adding it or subtracting it. Since the parabola opens down, then our focus should be farther down on the y-axis, so we're going to subtract it. So the coordinate or the ordered pair for our focus for this problem is 0, negative 1/16. Number 5. What is the focus of the parabola y equals 9x squared plus 1? So I rewrote the problem. I redid it in a form that makes it easier to see my h and my k. Found my vertex, 0, 1. Used the formula to find my distance to the vertex. And then since this parabola opens up, I know I'm going to add that value to my y. So the ordered pair for my focus is 0, 37/36. Let's go over just a couple more before I turn you loose to let you do this on your own. So number 6. What is the directrix of the parabola y equals negative 6x squared plus 7? So what's different here is that they are asking about the directrix instead of the focus. So please make sure that you're reading your questions correctly so you know what you're looking for. The process is still very much the same, except you're going to see where you're adding or subtracting, right? So I rewrote the problem, then I wrote it in a form that made it easier to see my h and my k to get the ordered pair for my vertex. I sketched it out here. And then I checked to see if the parabola was opening up or down. Since this was x squared, well, that tells me if it's opening up or down. And then the negative 6 tells me down is the direction that it's opening. I used my formula here to get 1/24 as the distance between the vertex and the focus. But remember, that's also the distance between the vertex and the directrix. So once I've sketched this out, I can really see which direction I'm moving. If it was asking me the focus, I would have subtracted this from my y value, right? But it didn't ask me what my focus was. It asked me what my directrix was. So I'm going to be adding it to my y value, and since this is, it may be hard to see, I sketched it in as a dotted line, but since this is a line, then you're not going to have an answer that's an ordered pair. When it asks you for the directrix, you're going to have the equation for a line. So I took my 7, which was my y value, then I added the c value, so 1/24. You can see my little elementary school math over here. And then what I got was y equals 169/24. So remember, it's going to be a y equals or an x equals, something like that for the equation of the line for the directrix. So when it asks you for the focus, your answer will be an ordered pair. When it asks you for the directrix, your answer will be in the form of an equation for a line. That'll be a y equals if it opens up or down, or it's going to be an x equals if it opens left or right. And the last practice problem. What is the directrix of the parabola y equals -9x squared minus 3? So I rewrote my problem. I wrote it in a form that made it easier to see the h and the k. The vertex is 0, -3, so I sketched it out. And then I know that my directrix, if this parabola opens down, as we saw the -9, if this parabola opens down, the directrix is going to be above it. So I find that distance, that c, 1/36, and then I'm going to add it to the y value because I want to go up on the y-axis, not down. So once I add 1/36 to that y value, there's my little, again, my little elementary school math. Then I got -107 divided by 36. And that's it.